This is Center Stage, putting your firm in the spotlight by highlighting business owners and other industry experts to help take your firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week we are revisiting a topic that we've covered on the show before, and that is automations, which you probably figured that out because you read the title of the show, but we're doing it because I really believe that this is a big key to helping you grow and scale your firm. And to help us out this week, we are joined by attorney Devin Miller. He has really turned his passion for automations and setting all of those up in his own firm. He's really turned it around, and he does a lot of work to help others do that as well. And he gives a lot of great insight. And so I'm really glad he's here. Devin, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on. Definitely excited to be here.
So yeah, before we jump in, give everybody just a quick little background about yourself and just how you came to enjoy and be so passionate about automations.
Yeah, so I'll give the 30-second or whatever second synopsis of just myself and background as far as or who I am. So the thing that's most important to me is father of four, husband of 14 years. And so have four kids, ages 11 to 5. And so oldest is a son and then 3 girls. So that keeps me busy, or certainly busy outside of just the normal work. But then in addition to my family, as far as legal career or career in general, so I ended up getting 4 degrees, so electrical engineering, Mandarin Chinese, I got an MBA and then the law degree. And so I've always kind of had 2 passions. Love startups, love small businesses, did several of those, build those, and everything from small family businesses up to 7 and 8 figure businesses. In addition, I have also chased the legal career. So I've been doing that since graduating law school, and I've always focused on intellectual property. So patents, trademarks, copyrights. We also do a reasonable amount of business related law. So kind of things that are our mantra, especially with my firm, is we help startups and small businesses or protect and grow their business. So generally, if there's anything that's kind of protecting and growing your business, we tend to offer those services with the main focus being intellectual property.
Wow. Awesome. So let's jump in right off the bat here. I know that law firms are just notoriously difficult to scale. And I guess kind of a little bit of background. So my first sort of foray into the world of scalability and business growth came from Michael Gerber's E-Myth. And I think that actually the first one that I read was the E-Myth Revisited, and just all about, and I think it was the law firm specific edition. And one of the things that really stood out to me in the book was he had a whole analogy about McDonald's and how they used, Ray Kroc kind of revolutionized the whole scalability factor and all of that. And it's really hard for a law firm to be like McDonald's, like regardless of your feelings on McDonald's and whether you think it's cheap and it's bad and all that kind of stuff, the systems that they have revolutionized businesses everywhere. But why is it that law firms are so difficult to sort of replicate that model?
And going back to Ray Kroc, this McDonald's, if I were to be a defender of McDonald's, which I'm not, I don't love McDonald's. I think when Ray Kroc originally, and it was actually the McDonald brothers before Ray Kroc, and then he went, that's a whole different discussion that he ended up taking over McDonald's and took it away from him, which,
right.
But, was a much better product to begin with. And then they've slowly systematized it to the point that while it's fast, it's not nearly as delicious as what it was when it started. But with all that said, I think if I were to put the biggest, at least in my mind, and this is all subjective in my opinion, but the biggest hindrance is lawyers and law firms, and I'll kind of a bit synonymous because law firms are run by lawyers, are very adverse to change, and they are very adverse to technology in general. I get there's exceptions to every rule, but if I were to look at all the law firms, I've worked for AM Law Top 100 law firms, and I also work there's boutique law firms. I work for remotely, and so I've done a pretty good gambit, and yet they're all mostly the same. They have very little automation. They have very little back end. They're very individual heavy, and you're going to do the same things over. And yet, whenever you try and introduce something into a law firm of, hey, here's a way to systematize it. Here's a better way to do it. Hey, do you know that there's something out there called LegalZoom that is actually making inroads and people are using it? Everybody just kind of says, well, we're going to ignore all that and we're just going to do the way we've been doing it for 200 years and we're comfortable. And if you were to look at law firms, the way they did it 200 years ago and the way they did it today, other than we have email and we have a website. We have maybe some cloud storage. Like there isn't a lot of difference. Like, yes, we don't have paper files as much anymore. We have more digital, but there's so much of the same thing. And yet there's a lot of technology out there that I think if done right now, I think, and I'll take a break and say, I think the other issue is that attorneys are generally risk adverse. And so I think by training, by worried about, you have the bar association, worried about getting, malpractice, and are we going to get the bar that's coming in? We've been trained to be so risk averse that we don't want to adopt anything new, because we can always make an excuse for here's why it's a bad idea and here's why we shouldn't change. And so it has significantly hampered what the legal field could be, because we don't want to change and we can make a lot of excuses.
Yeah. And kind of to step back for a second, while I was going through the McDonald's analogy, I heard a voice in the back of my head where it's like, oh, well, God, I don't want to turn my law firm into a generic unhealthy thing. Maybe this really isn't for me, but it's the overall picture. It's having those systems and processes documented and having them in place. It doesn't necessarily mean, you're going to turn your law firm into the McDonald's of the legal industry, in terms of like quality, subjectively speaking. But
right.
One of the things, and this is where your expertise comes into play, setting up those automations. And first of all, explain what you mean when you say automations, just kind of at a broader level. What all goes into that?
So yeah, I'm a big believer in automation. So we could talk for hours about all the different things we've automated. I'm sure that I would find it very interesting. You might, nobody else will. But it's a general level. I look at automation at its fundamental core is really two motivations. One is I am looking for, and it sounds kind of counterintuitive with automations, but freeing up the bandwidth for myself and the other people at the firm so we can have more human interactions, which is kind of the opposite when you generally think of automation. It's generally taking away human interactions. But what I mean by that is there's a lot of things that we do that really don't need to be done by a human. In other words, we have set up, give you a couple examples, the way that we have set up a lot of our follow-ups are done via automations. We have it triggered. When we fill out a form, when we report it out, it follows up with them automatically. It sends out the information that they need. And then if in a couple days we haven't heard from them, if they haven't emailed back, we send up another automated invoice. We also have billing invoice. So once we set them up as a client, we indicate what matter it is, invoices go out automatically. It creates it, it sends it, they pay it. Once they pay it, it automatically sends them the form for the information we'll need for the matter. I don't have to touch it. So from the time I talk with them, do an initial consultation, I don't have to talk with them again until we have the information or ready to get going on the matter. Now, it doesn't mean they haven't got interaction, but it means that we haven't had to do a lot of that follow-up. Your conflicts of interest check done automated, sending out invoices done automated, get the information for for a patent application, that's automated. Now we have a ton of video in place, we have a lot of explanation, we have a lot of emails, we have a lot of follow-up, and we also have things in place with automation that allow us to, if they're not moving forward, it gives us a notification, lets us know, and we reach out to them and actually have that human interaction. So for me, it allows you to free up that time for human interaction. And two, it also removes a lot of error and it removes a lot of time. So if you're sending out emails and are doing things on a routine basis, you're sending out the exact same email, other than you're changing the name and maybe it's a very light amount of information, and you're doing that over and over and over again. One is you're likely to mess up because you're going to forget to put something in, or you're going to leave something in the boilerplate. And two, you're just wasting a whole bunch of time that really doesn't need to be done. So for me, increasing the amount of human interaction to make it a better experience for the client. And two, it's reducing the number of error, and it's also reducing the amount of human hours that need to be done. So at a very broad level, that's where I would put as automation.
Yeah. And you talk about the human interaction level. I think it doesn't just allow for more human interaction, but the time that you spend interacting with your clients is more quality time, whether you're helping explain, the details of their case, or really diving in with them to really get the most details out of it that maybe you had to potentially skip over, you had to breeze through, or whatever it was you're doing. And so to your point, and if you don't have this data, it's fine. But in your experience, if you could ballpark it, how much extra time does that give you, pre-automations to now that you're spending with, having more of that quality interaction where you're actually able to have those real conversations?
I don't know on that. Where I would put is I would say we'd have to have about double the staff is what we have now. If we didn't have the automations in place, I look and say I basically have to double the size of my staff. Right now we have about, or I'd say 3.5 people, because some of them aren't full time and that's remote and different things. But if I just say we probably have to take our staff from the 3 people can cover it to about 7 or 8 people. So in that sense, it allows us to decrease, not in a bad way, but decrease our staff. But 2, I would also say for the amount of interaction, if you were to talk, I would, maybe I'm wrong, I'd put it as a point of pride. If you do, I'd say survey any one of our clients and ask them the amount of, or how well they feel that we have trained them, we've educated them, we've interacted with them. I'd probably put us at the 1% of law firms. Now, I know that we're tooting our own horn, but if you're to go, most of the clients that come into us that have been with other law firms, they'll say, you got, something along the lines of it's the breath of fresh air, or hey, I can actually call when you're available. I email you and you email me back the same day or within the same hour. You are, hey, if I have a question, I can ask you. And you're also, when I read a document, you explain what it means and all of those things, and it increases the level of quality and how or well they feel about the service. And it's really not that we spend a lot of time setting up the automations and testing them and getting them right. But once we get that, it gives it a lot better feel. Really, it makes us feel like we're a lot bigger law firm than we are because we've set that in place.
Yeah. And I think another big thing, at least for me, is the time that you get, and whether that's, and there are a couple of different ways you can look at it. It's either because I feel like most lawyers, especially solo and small firm lawyers, they're probably working 60, 70 hours a week a lot of the time. And how much of that time is spent doing stuff that could be automated? That's just that standard form work and
how much of that time is sending out the email that you sent out 20 times to every other client or 100 times? How much of that is sending out an invoice? How much of that is following up on an invoice? How much of that is getting information from the clients? How much of it is setting meetings and going back and forth and figuring out coordinating schedules? Everything I just listed there, we have it automated. And so Now I would shift gears, and I know you didn't ask, but the one other thing that automation is to me is it also has allowed us to expand our services, which I think is something that is cool for us. I mentioned, Legal Zoom, and there's other ones out there, Rocket Lawyer and other things. Yeah. But the interesting thing is it just largely gets ignored by all the attorneys, and everybody kind of knows it's out there, and they always downplay it. And I'm not saying that they're the best service, and I think that there are a lot of things that could be better, but they're out there, and there's a large portion of the population that uses them, sees the merit, and is tired of it. And so one of the other things that we've done, in addition to a lot of the things we do at the law firm, is we also looked and said, what can we do to compete with them, or what can we do to make a better system or service? So we've actually rolled out a lot of DIY legal services that are set to be, it's not going to be as good as an attorney. I never claim it to be as good as an attorney, but we also have a lot of clients that can't always afford an attorney rate for every single matter. And I think that a lot of times attorneys kind of almost stick their nose up. Well, if you can't afford an attorney, you shouldn't, what's wrong with you type of a thing. And yet we're leaving a big gap in the market for those that don't want to pay for an attorney, even if they have the money, because they don't see the value or they don't have the money. And so a lot of times, the other thing we've really focused on with automations is doing a lot of the DIY legal services that we really, when we do them, it's a lot of repetitive work that we've already done 100 times, and we have the templates, we have those set up in place. And so now we're able to expand our service offering. We're able to capture additional clients, and it really, once we have it set up, doesn't cost us any more. And a lot of times it is a way that we generate new clients that are now coming back. So they use that service to get something going. And then when they do need an attorney, they come back to us. So I think it's another way to expand your service offering without having to, again, bring on a whole bunch of staff.
Yeah. And, kind of adjacent to your point, you talk about how you were able to create more services and stuff. I mean, that's opportunities that come up because you weren't spending all these extra hours just doing all of this stuff that could have been automated. Another way to look at it is you get to spend more time doing the things you actually enjoy doing. Because I don't think anybody really starts a business. I mean, I'm sure there might be a couple people out there, but I mean, I don't know many people who would start a business who's just like, man, I started this business to send template emails and spend my weekends setting up,
No,
files.
that's what all the attorneys hate. And so they all hate it. They all don't want to do it. They all try and avoid it or hire support staff or hire paralegals, and they still end up doing it. And yet then they also push back against, well, but yeah, we can't automate that. It has to have a human person look at it. Well, no, you do have to do some work. I'm not saying that there is zero work of setting up automation. We're on our third iteration of what we've done with automations. We're continually looking at how to improve, how to update. When the first time we rolled things out, it worked fine. It wasn't like it was horrible, but we learned a lot of things as to what didn't work well, what people didn't understand, where they could be improved, when things needed to be followed, when it needed a human touch. And so there is that iterative process, and yet it has allowed us to expand it. And then, yeah, it's even template documents, I'm doing another NDA. Well, I need to be an NDA. I need to do this custom for this individual. How much did you actually change? Well, I changed about 1% of the document. Right. And was that really just the name, the parties involved, a little bit of their description, and could 95% of that been done via automation? Well, yeah, but and then they don't have, you don't have a good answer. Why didn't you set that up as automation? I just never got around to it. I don't know how to do it. So the other thing we've done is, so we've set up a lot of automations, and then we also, like with our legal services, we also set up a DIY or white label service for a lot of other firms. And so we're saying, hey, if we're going to do all this work to figure out our own automations, why don't we help other firms that can kind of drop in, offer, do a lot of the DIY services, and especially if they're either wanting to expand their services, or to your point, they're wanting to free up and not do a lot of that plug and play. Why not just let us set up, do the back end for you?
Yeah. So, and so then let's kind of go down that track a little bit. I mean, if someone is looking to start automating tasks, processes, whatever, in your opinion, I mean, where are some good starting points for that?
Well, I would say, I'll do a shameless self plug. If they're really wanting to just get started, they can go to DIY white label, and they can plug in our system. Now, I'm not saying that that's the endpoint they want to end up with. They may get into it and say, this is awesome, I want to do it myself. But it's a good way that we've set it up. It takes some people about 5 minutes to drop in. We have about 15 services that are DIY legal services. It takes about 5 minutes per service to add. So you can get going in like 2 or 3 hours and offer 15 new services to your law firm. And even better, we run all the back end, and we do all the filings, we do all the managing, so they don't even have to manage the client any more than they want to. We have that all set up. So that's an easy way. Now, if beyond that, you're saying, okay, great, now there's a shameless self plug, and maybe I'll check it out. But the other thing is if you're saying, I want to get started, where we started was, first of all, we found a system. We've tried a couple different systems. We started out with HubSpot. HubSpot's still a great system. It gets pretty expensive. You have to scale up, and they aren't set up as well for law firms. And so we switched over to another service called Lawmatics, kind of a HubSpot, but for law firms. But really, for either one, when we built the systems as we were going, it was looking at what easiest question was what are we doing on a routine basis that we're doing over and over and over again that we hate, that we don't want to do, and that can be easily replicated. And then we said, okay, now what is that? Now I'm an engineer, I'm a nerd, so I would flow chart out what are the steps of if you're to look, you can't see my office, but if you're to look at the backside of this monitor, you would see I have about 2 whiteboards that are completely going through almost every step of the client journey. So we have mapped out, where does it start? Well, before we even contact them, there's some sort of lead generation. Okay, what can we do with lead generation? Then we have a free strategy meeting. Now, how do they schedule that strategy meeting? Well, what we don't want to do is make it so it's back and forth and email us, and then they fill out that form that you see on a website that goes into the Netherlands of nowhere. You never know where it goes, and you hope so. The client hopes that you reach out. No, we have a calendar schedule right there that links right to our calendars, that they can grab a day and time, and if that time's available, it schedules right on our calendar. Then we say, okay, now what's the next step after a strategy meeting? Well, that's a conflicts of interest check. Well, how do we do conflicts? Well, if we do a strategy meeting, when we do the strategy meeting, we fill out the attorney, or usually myself, will fill out a form. How did the strategy meeting go? Are they wanting to get started now? What do they want to get started on? And I'll take 2 minutes after the call, fill out that form. It sends out the conflicts of interest check. If they want to get started now, they want to get started in 2 weeks. It's set to follow up in 2 weeks. And then we say, okay, now if they want to get started now, what do they need next? Well, we need to gather all the information that they need or we need about the matter. If it's a patent or a trademark or something like that. So we send out, here's a form. That form has video, it has dialogue, it has walk along, so it doesn't feel like it's automated, captures all that information. What do we need next? We need an invoice. And so we go through and we get an invoice. Then we provide them an update every 2 weeks on where the matter is at. Once we need it approved, we send out a form that they fill out that they approve the matter, that they've actually done that, which also covers our own butt, that if they ever were to come back and say, I didn't approve it, we can say, we have the approval right here. Then we do a review and a follow-up. And I mean, so all of those things that, I know that's probably more in depth than what people are looking for, but we've mapped out every step along that client journey. And then we said, what along that client journey do we want to automate? Can we automate? And where do we want to have the human interactions? And by mapping it out, I think that's the best place, is to just say, what is it from someone, the first interaction they have with the firm? What is that process? What are the things that are going to be routine or repetitive? And then how can we look to automate it?
Yeah. So, and thinking about all of that, and I was thinking about something that you said, obviously we're a marketing company, marketing super big on A/B testing. All right. Mm-hmm. So for someone who has no automations, and maybe they're like, I know I should do this, but I'm still a little hesitant. Is there an opportunity to A/B test some automations? Like, hey, this client comes in, we'll let them kind of go through the automated stuff. We'll see how their experience is. Meanwhile, we'll keep doing what we normally do and compare. Does that really work in the automation world?
Yes. I think it works. And the way we've done it slightly different, in the sense that I was just saying, hey, I want to get this or these things going, let's automate it. But we'd always have, it's kind of like when you fire someone, you have the exit interview. Well, I'm not firing the client, but you have the exit interview and you say, looking for feedbacks along the way. So we asked them, what was your experience? What are the things you would like better? What are the things you wouldn't like better? And then we implement that. And the other thing that we've done kind of along that A/B testing is we have what are called pipelines, or you can call them, different incremental things along the way, where we actually say, where are people getting stuck? Where are they taking too long? Where are they not understanding things? And then we try and adjust things and say, okay, are they getting stuck less often? Is it a decrease in the amount of time? Why is it taking people 2 weeks to pay an invoice? Are we not following up enough? Do they not understand how to pay it? Is it too difficult? Is the portal not? And so we can, in the sense, I don't know that it's A/B testing as much as doing it completely manual versus not, but you can see what along the steps are the things that are making it difficult for clients to move forward, to understand things, to have a good experience. And then based on that, you can look at that. So I think it's a good idea of A/B tests, is doing it manual versus not. I just was so excited to get to going to automation that I said, to heck with trying to A/B test it. I made the decision. I said, first of all, I think that's where the industry is going. People such as myself and others are going to figure it out, that we're going to keep pushing it. And by necessity, other firms are going to have to come along, because otherwise they're going to get left behind. They're just not going to be able to compete. And so what that is the realization, I said, we're diving in, we're going to do it. It's going to be painful. Now, if you ask my staff, some of them, they love it. Others are just, they say, oh no, it's another thing we have to figure out. And it's another thing. And yet usually it's like, okay, there's a pain period of a week or two, maybe a month, depending on how big a change it is. Then they buy in and they love it and they start using it and it makes it easier. And it's like, I wouldn't want to go back to the way we used to do it. That's way too much work and too much of a pain. But you do have to figure out that some of your staff are going to be resistant, and you're just going to have to, one, try and help them out, make sure they understand it, take feedback, make sure they feel involved. And then two, you're just going to have to bite the bullet and say, we are making this decision. We're going to do this, and you need to get on board because there isn't an alternative.
Yeah. And to that point, I think just as time goes on, our generation and the generations coming up behind us, that's just the world that we live in. We're used to dealing with automations and working with automations. And it'll get to a point, I think, where you encounter a law firm or another business who doesn't do it like that. And then it's really weird.
Yeah. And that's what we've even found with clients, like, oh, this is much easier to each step along the way. Oh, it makes sense. And we say, hey, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three. And they know it, it's anticipated, they get it on a well laid out schedule. And then they're saying, why didn't the other law firm do it this way? This is so much better and it makes so much more sense. And you guys are so much easier to interact with. And it's like, that's where I think things are going. So I think it's going to end up being that we're going to, law firms that are forward looking, and it's probably going to be the small startups, small law firms that are saying, hey, by necessity, we have to do this. They're going to push that forward, kind of like the legal Zoom. It's going to be one where law firms didn't offer it. They pushed against it. They wouldn't do it. And so somebody else outside the legal industry came along and said, hey, we're going to offer this. Lawyers might not love it, but guess what? Clients like it. And we don't really care if attorneys like it, because we're looking to offer to people that are needing legal services. And now by necessity, law firms are having to figure out how are we going to compete. Even if we want to ignore it, we still have to figure out how to compete. And that can be better marketing, it can be better messaging, it can be better interaction, whatever it is, you still have to adapt.
Yeah. Awesome. So before we wrap up here, share that URL one more time and how people can get in touch with you to get some help on setting up some automations.
Yeah. So if they want to, if they want to do this kind of the drop in, hey, we've got about 15 legal services that they're already set up to go. They can go to DIY, just the letters DIY, whitelabel.com. That gives all the information. As you can probably guess, we have a lot of it automated, so you can sign up and get going, and it makes it really slick and easy. You can have it set up by the end of the day if they're to go check it out. If they want to just, we've toyed with, and we haven't done it to a full degree, or I thought about it in the future, but I haven't done it. But I'm definitely happy to talk about automations, give some or guidelines. At some point, my anticipation is we're probably going to go and more offered as a full legitimate service of, hey, we'll come in and actually help you set these up. Especially for intellectual property firms. We've done some of that on more of a one-off basis, but if they want to reach out to me, they can just go to meetdevin.com. It links right to my calendar. My calendar's right on the page. Grab a day and time that works for me. Happy to chat with you one-on-one, go through what we've done and see if we can help you. So they want to drop in some of our automations, DIY legal services, they can go to DIY whitelabel.com. And if they want to reach out with me directly, go to meetdevin.com.
Awesome. So yeah, I think big takeaways from today: automate your stuff, automate the stuff that you don't like doing so you can have more time doing the things that you actually enjoy doing. And Devin is happy to help you get that stuff off the ground. One final question for you. We ask all of our guests here, and that is, if you had one piece of advice for our lawyers out there, what would it be?
All right. Yeah, this is a good question. I took a pause because I was trying to decide how I wanted to phrase. I would say, take a second and look at why you're doing something. In other words, and that was probably the biggest thing for me. And when I started the firm is, am I doing this because this is the way I'm used to, because it's already been, or it's the way it's already been done, or does it make sense to me? And if it's it's always been, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why I do it this way, but it's what I'm used to and it's what I was trained on. That's not a good reason to do something. On the other hand, it says, no, this makes sense to me. This is why I can logically, as an attorney, lay out my argument as to why you should be doing it this way, and keep doing it that way. But I think that too often, we as attorneys, as much as anybody else, we get stuck in the rut of, I've been trained on doing, I don't really know why I was trained this way, but this is what I'm used to. And then you never look for opportunities to improve your practice, your firm, the way you interact with clients, and you're leaving a lot of opportunities on the table just because that's the way you've always done it. So my general takeaway would be, take a step back on each thing, or everything you do as you're doing your job and providing services, is say, why am I doing it this way? If it's because I've always been doing it that way, that's not a good reason. Figure out a better way to do it, the reason why it should be done that way, not just because you're used to it.
Awesome. Well, Devin, a lot of great insight there. Really do appreciate you joining us this week. That's going to do it for us on this episode. We appreciate all the feedback, all ratings and reviews that we're getting as well. If you have not done so yet, please drop a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to the show. We really do appreciate it. And that's it. Devin, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I had a blast.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.